Stone has a memory, if you know how to listen. High on the cathedral scaffolding, a young stonemason named Alara felt a strange vibration humming through her fingertips. She was restoring a crumbling gargoyle, its features worn smooth by centuries of rain, but this one felt different. As her hand brushed against the cold, ancient stone, a faint, spectral glow ignited within the figure. This simple touch awakened something dormant, setting her on a dangerous path to uncover a truth hidden in plain sight. She is about to learn that the gargoyles watching over the city are not just decorations. They are a secret prison, and a powerful group wants to shatter them open. By the end of this story, you will understand the true purpose behind these stone watchers and the ancient power they contain. What forgotten histories are sleeping in the stone all around us? I would love to know where you are listening from right now and what the local time is for you. Her fingers trace the rough, weathered stone with a new purpose. Alara worked meticulously, her cleaning tools brushing away centuries of grime and moss from the gargoyle's surface. Under the afternoon sun, the stone appeared ordinary, but she felt the persistent, faint vibration humming against her palm. Then she saw it, as her cloth passed over a deeply shadowed crevice under the creature's wing. A line of soft, blue light flickered into existence. It was a rune, a symbol she had never seen before, and it was not carved into the stone, but seemed to glow from within it. Only by looking at it from a specific angle could she even perceive its presence. One by one, more of the faint, glowing marks revealed themselves, forming a cryptic pattern around the gargoyle's base. A sudden pressure built behind her eyes, and the world tilted. For a dizzying moment, her vision was not her own. She saw a web of light superimposed over the city's oldest quarter, a phantom cartography of glowing lines connecting ancient wells, forgotten alleyways, and the foundations of buildings that no longer stood. The vision was fragmented, like a puzzle missing most of its pieces, but its clarity was terrifying. This was a map, and it was now etched into her mind. Her foreman's sharp voice shattered the trance. He stood below, his face a mask of impatience, demanding to know why she was wasting the day on one grotesque. He called it superstitious nonsense, a pile of old rocks not worth the time she was spending. He gave her a direct ultimatum: finish the general cleaning by week's end, or find another job. The choice was stark and immediate: her livelihood or this impossible secret. That night, with only the moon and a small lantern for light, Alara climbed back onto the silent scaffolding. Her decision was made. Standing before the gargoyle, she reached out and with a trembling finger began to trace the path of the first glowing line from her vision in the air before her. As her hand moved, a soft grinding sound echoed from a nearby rooftop. She looked up, her heart hammering against her ribs. One of the stone watchers, a stern-faced figure holding a book, had turned its head almost imperceptibly, its blank stone eyes now fixed directly on her. It was not just one guardian, but an entire network, and it was aware of her. She focused, completing the mental path to the first landmark, an old public fountain that had run dry decades ago. The moment the connection solidified in her thoughts, the gargoyle at her fingertips emitted a low, resonant hum, a clear and undeniable note that seemed to pull her gaze across the sleeping city, toward the dark, silent shape of the Municipal archives. The sound was a guide, and the path was open. The Municipal archives were a fortress of forgotten paper, smelling of dust and slow decay. Alara moved through the towering shelves like a ghost, guided by that resonant hum still echoing in her mind. Her search led her to the deepest, most isolated corner of the building, a cramped office lit by a single green lamp. This was the domain of Alaric, a man so old the city's younger residents considered him a myth. He looked up from a crumbling manuscript, his eyes sharp and hostile behind thick glasses. "Who are you, and who sent you?" he demanded, his voice a dry rasp. Before he could throw her out, Alara spoke a single word, describing the shape of the rune she had seen. The effect was immediate. All the anger drained from his face, replaced by a stunned, almost fearful recognition. He slowly rose, his joints protesting, and for a long moment, he just stared at her. "You should not know that," he whispered. "No one living should know that." He confessed then that he was the last of a lineage called the Watcher Keepers, a line sworn to protect the secret of the stone sentinels. His family had guarded this truth for generations, watching as the world forgot the purpose of the stones watching over it. His help came with a grave warning. A group known as the Veiled Guild had hunted his predecessors for centuries. "They do not seek to protect the prison," he explained. "They seek to shatter it, to harvest the power within for themselves." Your actions on the scaffolding, your tracing of the old paths, were like a beacon in the silence. They will have felt it. They will be coming. Alara's choice was terrifyingly simple. She could flee and try to hide what she knew, leaving the ancient secret undefended, or she could place her trust in this bitter, reclusive stranger. Looking into his weary eyes, she saw not a threat, but the last flicker of a dying flame. She made her decision, forging a fragile alliance built on shared peril. To seal their pact, Alaric unlocked a hidden drawer in his desk, retrieving a slender, leather-bound book forbidden by the city authorities long ago. Its pages contained the brutal truth. The gargoyles were never simple rain spouts or architectural superstitions. He read aloud, his finger tracing the elegant script. "They are a cage, a network of stone bindings constructed to hold ancient spirits of chaos, entities of raw, untamed energy that once threatened to unravel the world itself. The power the Veiled Guild craves is the very thing that could destroy us all." The sound of splintering wood from the floor below was sudden, violent, and far too close. The old man's eyes snapped toward the door. The archives were no longer a sanctuary. They were a trap, and they were no longer alone. The bookcase swung inward on silent, ancient hinges, revealing only darkness and the smell of wet earth. Alaric shoved her through, his command a sharp whisper to the stone watcher standing guard. As the bookcase slid shut, Alara heard the heavy grind of stone against stone, as the sentinels sealed the passage behind them permanently. They were committed. The air in the tunnel was cold and still, the only light a faint, phosphorescent moss clinging to the walls, and the walls were watching. Dozens of gargoyles lined the passage, their forms emerging from the rough-hewn rock, each one a silent, dormant jailer. Alaric moved with a practiced urgency, but Alara stumbled, her hand flying to her temple. A low moan echoed not in the air, but in her mind. It was a chorus of anguish, a psychic resonance of the entities bound within the stone. She felt their ancient rage, their desperation for freedom, a tidal wave of raw emotion that threatened to drown her own thoughts. "You must control it," Alaric urged, his voice strained. "Do not listen to their voices. Listen to the silence between them. Find the pattern." It was like trying to calm a storm by focusing on the spaces between lightning strikes. She fought to build a mental wall, not to block the pain, but to let it flow around her without pulling her under. Her newfound focus became her compass. The psychic noise was not uniform. It ebbed and flowed, and the path of least resistance felt like a faint, cool current in the torrent. "This way," she whispered, her voice trembling. She led them down a fork in the tunnel where the emotional static was quieter. Suddenly, a gargoyle to their left shuddered. A web of hairline fractures spread across its chest, pulsing with a sickly orange light. The spirit within was thrashing against its prison. The psychic scream was deafening, a spike of pure agony that drove Alara to her knees. "Do not let it break," Alaric said, his face pale. "If one fails, the chain is weakened." Gritting her teeth, Alara reached out, not with her hands, but with her mind. She did not push against the spirit's rage. She acknowledged it. She focused on the stone itself, on the ancient, steady patience of the binding. She imagined that patience as a cool balm, soothing the frantic energy. Slowly, the glowing cracks began to fade, the light receding back into the stone until the gargoyle was still once more. Its silent vigil resumed. It was in that moment of connection that she understood the true horror of the Veiled Guild's goal. "They do not just want to release them," she breathed, the realization chilling her. "They want to break the cages and harness the chaos inside. They would use that power not for creation, but for domination, to reshape the world by force." The trapped spirits were not just prisoners, they were a weapon. Following the lingering psychic echo, a trail of sorrow etched into the very rock, they were drawn forward. The tunnel widened, then opened abruptly into a breathtaking space. They stood at the edge of a vast, circular chamber, deep beneath the city's heart. The air hummed with a profound, ancient energy, and in the center, illuminated by a single shaft of ethereal light from some unseen source above, stood the oldest watcher of them all. The Prime Watcher stood as a silent mountain in the chamber's center, a colossal figure with 4 faces, gazing eternally toward the cardinal directions. Its stone was not gray but a deep, volcanic black, and its surface was a tapestry of interlocking runes that pulsed with a slow, steady light, like a sleeping heart. This was the anchor, the keystone of the entire prison network. Alaric fell to one knee, a gesture of profound respect, his breath catching. Alara felt the truth of it in her bones, a resonant frequency that harmonized every vibration she had felt since this began. As she stepped forward, her hand outstretched, the chamber dissolved around her. She was no longer in a cavern. She stood on a windswept plain, under a sky churning with raw, chaotic energy. Twisted spirits of storm and shadow raged, threatening to tear the world apart. Before her, a council of ancient stonemasons, their faces grim with purpose, stood beside beings of pure, calm light. The celestial beings were not conquerors, they were healers. A pact was forged, not through force, but through sacrifice. The masons offered their greatest craft, the art of shaping stone into vessels of eternal patience. while the celestials bound their own essence into the first runes, becoming the living locks. The Prime Watcher was the first of these prisons, the cornerstone upon which the entire sanctuary of the city was built. The vision was one of sorrowful necessity, not glorious victory. The sound of shattering stone ripped her back to the present. Figures clad in dark, practical leathers poured into the chamber, their movements precise and lethal. At their head stood a woman named Lysandra, her face sharp and intelligent, her eyes burning with a fervent, unsettling light. "You see the cage, but you call it a sanctuary," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. She gestured to the Prime Watcher. "That power belongs to humanity. It is our right to claim it, to shape a new world order free from the whims of forgotten gods and their self-appointed jailers." Then she revealed their progress, a truth that turned Alara's blood to ice. "We have already turned 3 of the outer sentinels to our cause. Their bindings now answer to us." As if on cue, a deep groaning echoed from the tunnels beyond, followed by the distinct, sharp crack of splitting granite. The corrupted gargoyles were awakening, their stone skins fracturing as the enraged spirits within tested their new, manipulated limits. Alaric moved to stand between the guild and the Prime Watcher, his old body trembling but resolute. Alara's mind raced. Reasoning with Lysandra's fanaticism was impossible. Her belief was a wall. The only path left was a desperate gamble, a ritual Alaric had mentioned only in whispers, meant to reinforce the Prime Watcher's bonds by channeling energy through the network's central rune. It would require all of her focus, leaving her utterly vulnerable. She met Alaric's eyes, a silent message passing between them. He would buy her time. She placed her hands on the cold, pulsating stone of the Prime Watcher, closing her eyes against the chaos. She poured her will into the ancient runes, seeking the original, harmonious frequency of the celestial pact. It was like trying to sing a single, pure note in the middle of a hurricane. Lysandra's shout was a distant thing, orders to stop her. The clash of Alaric, holding the line, was a muffled scuffle. All that mattered was the pattern, the song within the stone. As the first threads of the ritual connected, the Prime Watcher's 4 sets of eyes flared with a blinding, white light. A deep, resonant hum filled the chamber, growing in intensity until it was a physical force. The ground beneath their feet began to shake, dust and small stones raining from the ceiling. The very foundations of the city, built upon this ancient prison, started to tremble in response. Her chisel was an extension of her will, each strike a whisper of intent against the ancient stone. While Alaric fought a desperate, rearguard action against the advancing guild agents, Alara's world narrowed to the surface of the Prime Watcher. Her stonemason's hands, trained to shape and mend, now worked with a sacred precision, inlaying the first of the reinforcement runes. The moment the symbol was completed, it flared with a cool, blue light. A corresponding pulse of energy rippled out through the network, a wave of calming order. High above, in the city streets, one of the corrupted gargoyles that had been groaning and cracking suddenly stilled, the sickly orange glow within its fractures dimming as the stone seamlessly knit itself back together. But each rune came at a cost. With every symbol she carved, Alara felt a piece of her own vitality drain away, as if the ritual was drawing directly from her life force. Her head throbbed, her vision blurred at the edges, and her arms grew heavy as lead. Lysandra saw her advantage. Breaking from the skirmish with Alaric, she produced a small, metallic device from her belt, its surface covered in sharp, angular glyphs. "Do not let her complete the sequence," she yelled to her followers. She activated the device, which emitted a high-pitched whine that climbed into an unbearable frequency. A visible shock wave of distorted air shot from the tool and slammed directly into the Prime Watcher's chest. The impact was catastrophic. A deep, resonant crack echoed through the cavern, and the chamber itself seemed to groan in agony. Stone dust and debris rained down as entire sections of the ceiling trembled, threatening a total collapse. The foundational bindings, already strained, shuddered under the assault. Ilara stumbled, the chisel nearly falling from her numb fingers. To continue was to risk being buried alive, but to stop was to guarantee the end of everything. Pushing past the crushing exhaustion and the screaming protest of her own body, she forced her mind to focus. The final rune, the Keystone of Binding, was the most complex of all, a labyrinthine pattern that required absolute mental clarity. It was the master key to the entire prison. Success would not just repair the damage, it would permanently lock the network, sealing the spirits away for another millennium. But a single mistake, a tremor in her hand or a lapse in concentration, would have the opposite effect. The flawed Keystone would overload the system, causing a chain reaction of failures that would shatter every gargoyle in the city at once, unleashing a storm of chaos that would make the ancient cataclysm look like a gentle breeze. Her breath stilled, the world narrowed to the point of her chisel and the unmarked stone. She blocked out the sounds of combat, the groaning earth, the triumphant shout from Lysandra. Every ounce of her strength, every memory of the vibration in her fingertips, every echo of the celestial pact from her vision, she poured into the movement of her hand. The chisel bit into the stone, tracing the impossible geometry of the Keystone. It was a physical prayer, a final, desperate act of faith. As her tool struck the final, perfect mark, a profound silence fell. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a wave of pure, silent energy expanded from the Prime Watcher in a perfect sphere, washing over the chamber. It did not destroy, it simply stilled. The combatants froze mid-motion, their forms locked in place as if time itself had stopped. The silence was absolute, a deep and resonant calm that felt older than the city itself. The wave of energy had not destroyed the Veiled Guild, but pacified them, leaving each member encased in a thin, translucent film that resembled polished stone. They stood frozen throughout the chamber, their faces locked in expressions of shock and fury, transformed into a new gallery of silent watchers. Above them, the Prime Watcher's pulsating light dimmed, fading from a brilliant white to a faint, dormant gray. The great anchor had done its duty, but the cost was its own vibrant consciousness. A low grinding echoed through the cavern as the ancient tunnels, their purpose fulfilled, began to contract and seal. The hidden world was closing its doors. Ilara's own exhaustion was a heavy cloak, but a pained gasp pulled her attention to the floor. Alaric lay where he had fallen, his hand pressed to his side, his breath shallow and ragged. The fight had taken its final toll. There was no time to ponder the justice of the guild's fate, no moment for moral deliberation. The stone around them was shifting, passages they had used moments before now shrinking into solid rock. She had to choose, and the choice was a terrible, immediate wait. To try and free Lysandra and her followers was to risk them breaking free in the chaos, undoing everything. To leave them was to become their jailer, to accept the burden of their living entombment. Her eyes met Alaric's, and in his pained gaze, she saw not a command, but a resignation. He had carried this weight for a lifetime. Now it was hers. With a final look at the petrified forms, she turned her back, heaving Alaric's arm over her shoulder. The city's safety, the world's balance, demanded this price. She would carry the knowledge of their fate, and the silence required to maintain it. The path back was a race against the contracting stone. Walls smoothed into seamless barriers behind them, and the phosphorescent moss withered and died as they passed, plunging the way into near darkness. Ilara moved on instinct and memory, guided by the fading hum of the network and the desperate need for open air. The final ascent was a tight, crumbling stairwell that seemed to push them upward. She burst through a concealed archway, hidden behind a thick curtain of ivy in a forgotten corner of a city park, just as the dawn's first light touched the sky. She dragged Alaric clear, collapsing onto the dew-soaked grass as, with a soft, final sigh of grinding granite, the entrance sealed itself forever into an unremarkable stone wall. The city around them began to stir, completely unaware of the cataclysm that had been averted deep beneath its streets. The balance had not simply been restored, it had been fundamentally altered. The Prime Watcher slept, the last keeper was dying, and the only person who knew the truth was a young stonemason lying in the grass, watching the sun rise over a skyline still guarded by silent stone sentinels. The official letter arrived on a crisp autumn morning, appointing Ilara as the master stonemason for the cathedral's full restoration. She accepted the title with a quiet nod, her hands still bearing the faint scars from the chamber below. This position was not a reward, it was a duty disguised as a promotion, giving her the perfect cover to maintain the silent, sleeping network. High on the scaffolding each day, she would run her fingers along the watchers, feeling for the slightest tremor, the faintest flicker in the ancient binding. Her work was a continuous, subtle prayer of maintenance. She established a small, trusted circle, a handful of artisans with steady hands and quiet hearts. She did not burden them with the full, terrifying truth, but she taught them the old symbols, the proper way to clean the stone that honored its purpose, and the stories of the celestial pact. The knowledge would not die with her, yet, in the quiet moments between the hammer strikes and the mixing of mortar, the memory of the cavern returned. She would see Lysandra's petrified face, a mask of frozen fury, and feel the weight of her choice all over again. Had she become a jailer herself? The question shadowed her, a private guilt that no amount of sunlight could dispel. To fight that darkness, she made another choice. She began to weave the truth into her public work, not as a dire warning, but as a sacred history. On guided tours for school children, she would point to a gargoyle and speak not of monsters, but of ancient protectors who watched over the city's dreams. She told stories of the masons who carved them with great purpose, embedding a legacy of guardianship into the stone itself. The immediate threat of the Veiled Guild was sealed in stone, but their ideology was a ghost that still walked the world. Other groups, other individuals hungry for power, could someday seek the same forbidden knowledge. Her vigilance was a solitary flame against a wind that never truly stopped blowing. One afternoon, as she carefully set the final, newly carved stone into the paw of a restored watcher, a familiar sensation coursed through her. It was a faint, warm hum that traveled from the stone up her arm, a clear and unmistakable vibration of approval. The network was not just a passive cage, it was a living system, and it recognized its new guardian. The stone sentinels would keep their watch, and now, so would